Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or indeed good evening, depending on your time zone and depending on when you are watching this. It is Tuesday, the 2nd of June, 2020. I'm James Innes, and this is my YouTube show, The Jobs Guru. I'm delighted to see you here today for today's episode, and I extend a very warm welcome to all those who have subscribed since the last episode. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do think about subscribing so that you don't miss out on the next episode. It's the start of week 4 of this show, and it is in fact the 13th episode, so let's hope there are no gremlins about today. In today's show, I'm going to be taking a look at the latest workplace, jobs, career, and employment news. I will, as always, be covering a question from one of my viewers. I'll be talking about ageism. I'll be examining how to deal with 10 common and potentially tricky CV situations in the most positive way possible. And next in the interview question series, I'll be asking, what do you do when there is no answer? Gosh. If you have any questions or comments as you watch, then do please let me have them below. And if you like what you see, then do please hit that YouTube thumbs up. Now then, first of all, I have had a good read of all the main news headlines, and in particular the workplace, jobs, careers, and employment-related headlines. The biggest headline I saw was perhaps in the Mirror today. British Airways workers told to accept pay cuts of up to 60% or face the sack. The Mirror claims it is an exclusive, saying they've seen a letter to BA employees, many of whom have been with the airline for several decades, telling them to accept pay cuts to avoid redundancy. Well, it may be an exclusive in the sense that they're the only ones to have seen this letter, but I for one knew about this over a week ago, right down to the date this letter was scheduled to be sent. Anyway, I'm a big fan of the government's furlough scheme, and I do feel it is very sad that some companies have nonetheless laid off large numbers of staff. In BA's case, though, I really can't see that they have much alternative other than to do what they're doing. The scheme may have been extended to the end of October, but it could be years before the aviation sector recovers fully, if indeed it ever does. I know it's very tough indeed on the staff in question, and I am very sorry for them, but the reality is that either BA does this and tries to survive, or it doesn't. Apart from that Mirror article, I'm going Financial Times all the way today. The headline in their work and career section is, "Every manager is having a midlife crisis." I can't help but feel that's maybe a slight generalization. Anyway, it's written by an associate professor of organizational behavior. And the point he's trying to make is that the pandemic has exposed the limits of managers who are purely focused on productivity and lacking in emotional intelligence. A more humanized management with skills in what he calls human relations 2.0 will be better equipped for the post-pandemic world. And another piece in the FT really caught my eye. How virtual reality helps real-life recruitment. Subheading, the technology also offers the prospect of remote teams being able to hold avatar-based meetings. Again, pretty intellectual stuff, but well worth the read, absolutely fascinating. But the piece I really want to focus on today is an article by George Parker, again in the FT. Rishi Sunak looks to rebuild economy with plans for big job creation scheme. Subheading, Chancellor lays out lifeline for millions of jobs to avoid mass UK unemployment. Apparently, ministers are busy drawing up plans for a big job creation scheme, and we sure as hell need one. There is a clear and present danger of mass unemployment, with warnings that the unemployment rate may soon hit 10%. Another forecast I saw suggested it could ultimately top 30%, which frankly makes me feel a little ill just to think about. Anyway, George Parker reports that Boris is discussing a job creation programme with his ministers, focusing on upgrading infrastructure, including broadband and green energy projects as well. Whilst the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, he's drawing up a skills package to retrain workers, particularly the young. Now, I've been saying for some time now that I believe the government really must seize the initiative on the employment front and dedicate the necessary time and support to setting up proper support for the rapidly rising ranks of the unemployed. They're facing an unprecedented situation and need all the help they can get as they try desperately to get themselves back into work. They need help with determining their options, deciding how to go about their job hunt, identifying how best to sell themselves, whether it's in their CV or on LinkedIn, and coaching to help them subsequently excel at interview. And obviously, if you find yourself in this most unfortunate situation, then we are here to help at jamesinnes.group. And now for something completely different. The Daily Mash reports, "I lost my job because of coronavirus, says man fired for sexual harassment and daytime drinking." Martin Bishop lost his marketing job in February, but is claiming to acquaintances and job interviewers alike that it was somehow a consequence of the lockdown, not being... He said, "I'm a victim of economic circumstance, like so many others. I won't complain. I gladly made that sacrifice." On the other hand, former colleague Hannah Tomlinson said, "What's he on about? he got kicked out for hanging around the coffee machine with an open bottle of Baileys, slurring at any women who came near. And let that be a lesson to us all, eh? So, on to that question from one of my viewers. Today's question has been sent in by Molly in Newcastle. She says, Dear James, does age matter? I worry that if I include my age in my CV, I'll be discriminated against because employers won't want me in my mid-50s. I have worked all my life in admin roles for various companies and took voluntary redundancy last year. Since then, I have struggled to get an interview, and when I do, they always phone and ask my age beforehand. How do I make prospective employers see that my age can be an advantage, not a hindrance? Well, Molly, in Newcastle, I do find your question particularly interesting, not least because I saw an article in the FT the other day which was headlined, Will Ageism Get Worse in the Post-Pandemic Workplace? Now, my first thought is that this is really quite outrageous. Nobody should be asking your age before giving you an interview or even during an interview. It's totally illegal. Whilst I might be an expert on all things job-related, I'm not a lawyer, and I think maybe you should consult one. But of course, that's not going to get you a job, is it? What will help you, I think, is reworking your CV to streamline your earlier career so as not to unduly highlight how long you've been working for. These days, it is no longer a requirement for a CV to detail each and every role you've had. Knock off some of the earlier roles. I certainly don't mean this to sound ageist, but in the recruitment sector, they're what we would call ancient history. Quite simply, prospective employers most interested in what you've done most recently, the past 5 and 10 years in particular, and they will have pretty little interest in anything that goes beyond that past decade. So how about using the heading Recent Career History and sticking to the past, say, 10 to 15 years? And do try to focus both your CV and your cover letter on your achievements rather than just your duties. Okay? Now, I'm always open to interesting new questions from my viewers, so if you have a workplace, jobs, careers, or employment-related question for me, then do please type it into that comment section below, and I may well feature it in a future episode of this show. And if I do, then one of my limited edition collector's item Jobs Guru coffee mugs, I have one here, will be yours. Use it for coffee, use it for tea, or as I do, just keep it on your desk looking pretty, and you can put your pens in it. Now, each day, as well as answering one viewer's specific question, I also look into a specific issue which is being raised by a number of different viewers, and today, leading neatly on from Molly's question, I shine my spotlight on ageism. Molly's not the only person to have written into me about this. Now, despite the law, many employers will still discriminate on the grounds of age. It's a fact of life. But it's equally important to remember that there are many who won't. In fact, there are many, myself included, who are fortunately intelligent enough to appreciate the wisdom and life experience of applicants who are perhaps nearer to the end of their careers than the beginning. There is only so much that can be done to combat age discrimination. Unfortunately, it does, like I say, remain a fact of life. And I'm certainly not justifying ageism, but if you think a potential employer has discriminated against you because of your age, then do ask yourself, would I want to work for someone that blinkered and narrow-minded anyway? Simple as that, yeah? Now then, on to the main topic I wish to discuss with you today. 10 solutions for 10 potential problems. I'm going to tackle how to deal with 10 common and potentially tricky CV situations in the most positive way possible. First up, what if you have little or no relevant work experience? Now, the most common reason for a candidate to lack experience is, of course, that they're newly qualified, possibly a recent school leaver or a recent graduate. The answer is to make the most of what you've got. Clearly, you need to lead with your education and qualifications section. This is going to be your biggest selling point. It should be the most significant feature of your CV, and you should give it all the attention it deserves. Following this, pick out skills you've acquired during your studies at school or university, regardless of whether or not you've yet had a chance to actually apply them in the workplace, and feature them as bullet points within a key skills section. Even if your work experience has been intermittent, part-time, and perhaps principally for the purposes of helping to fund your studies, rather than having actual relevance to what you intend to do next, you should still find it worth mentioning. Some workplace experience is always better than none. You're also entitled to expand the interest and activities section to include, for example, roles of responsibility you held in societies or clubs, voluntary work, etc. Normally, this section is a section you should keep pretty brief, but recent school leavers and graduates are entitled to pad it out just a little bit. And don't worry if your CV is only 1 page long. If you've already, you've got little or no work experience, then a recruiter's not going to be expecting a 2-page CV from you, are they? Now, okay, next. Of course, another reason for lacking relevant experience is you quite simply have decided you wish to change career path. So that's the next scenario here. What if your current job isn't relevant to the job you're now looking for? If you're trying to change career path, something a lot of people are doing at the moment, then this will be one occasion where you might very well be better served by the so-called functional CV. We don't have time to go into that now, but I'm sure you probably know what it is. If not, you can easily Google it. So first of all, you need to declare your future career intentions in an appropriately phased objective. This will help to avoid any confusion on the part of the reader. Your previous experience might not be directly relevant, but you should still present it in the best possible light. Try to focus on the transferable skills and abilities you've developed by making use of a key skills section. You can also dilute any attention which might be focused on your current role by following your key skills section with a key experience section. This should highlight aspects of your career history that are most relevant to the role you are now looking to undertake. Next, what if there are gaps in your career history? Well, unexplained gaps can naturally raise concerns in the minds of recruiters. They may think you have something to hide, and many recruiters will immediately draw their own conclusions, generally not very positive ones, and reject your application. A useful trick is certainly to cover up any gaps, sort of camouflage and blend over them by omitting months and only listing dates in your career's history. I think you should do this anyway, unless you're in a sector which really demands that level of detail, like the medical sector. Just list the years, no need to list the months for employment. If you've got larger gaps and can be concealed that way, then that can be problematic. But there always are, solutions. Most people have a gap or two in their career history. It's very common and not normally anything to worry about. How you go about handling a gap, well, that depends on the reasons for it. So if the reason isn't obviously negative, then there shouldn't be a gap anyway. You should just include a brief entry explaining what the situation was. Unfortunately, things like general unemployment, ill health, they're unlikely, at least initially, to be viewed favourably by a recruiter, and something like imprisonment certainly won't be viewed favourably. So my considered advice for dealing with these sorts of cases is to avoid making an issue with them on your CV. Research shows that less than half of recruiters notice gaps during their initial sift anyway. So rather than trying to explain yourself within your CV, thus drawing attention to the issue, you'd be much better off covering such matters at interview. And with a bit of luck, the recruiter won't even notice at interview either. So next, what if you have changed jobs far more frequently than the average? Well, as one candidate stated in his CV, note, please don't misconstrue my 13 different jobs as job hopping. I have never quit a job. Think about it. This is a real example from a CV. Getting through a large number of jobs in a short period of time can ring alarm bells in a recruiter's head. They may conclude that you're not capable of committing yourself or of maintaining your focus. They may deem you to be fickle. It's a natural enough assumption, even if it's not justified. Now, there may be any number of reasons why you've changed jobs so frequently. Explaining the reasons isn't important. The key is to emphasize what you have learned and what you are now able to offer an employer as a result of this breadth of experience. Highlight the diversity of the organizations you worked for and therefore the variety of skills which you acquired as a result. And the best way to communicate this is again to use the functional type of CV. So on to our next scenario, which is, well, what if you've been with the same organization for your entire career? Which is actually a lot more common than you might think. There are both positive and negative ways a recruiter will view this, okay? Someone who's been with the same organization for all or the vast majority of their career. Some might see it as a reflection of commitment and loyalty. Others may see it as a sign that the person's not keen on change or has, for whatever reason, been unable to change, resistant to change, for example. On balance, I don't feel this scenario to be nearly as much of a problem as some candidates believe it to be. You'd be surprised how many top executives have forged almost all of their careers in just one organization. Staying with one employer did, in fact, used to be entirely normal and desirable. It's only in very recent decades that people's career paths have become so much more complicated. A career is a career, whether you've worked for only one organization or a dozen. You will no doubt possess a wealth of transferable skills, abilities, and experience, and you should make sure your CV communicates this comprehensively. During the course of your career, you will have most likely undertaken a variety of roles, even if it's with the same employer, and each of these should be given the attention they deserve. It's as simple as that. And I often get people coming to me very worried about this situation. Oh, I worked for IBM for the past 25 years, and now I want to leave and move on somewhere else, but no one's going to accept me because, I've been 25 years with IBM. No, actually, it's mainly in your head. Changing your mindset is quite important on that front. So, next, what if you are overqualified for the role for which you're applying? Well, not a common situation generally, but one that certainly does arise, and at the moment, yes, getting more common, especially in times of higher than average unemployment, like right now, basically, with the coronavirus crisis. Being overqualified for a position, it's a significant hurdle. From the employer's point of view, employing someone like that can pose a major risk. Are you desperate and prepared to take any job going, whether or not you're really interested in it? Are you going to be disappointed with the role and move on quickly? Are you going to cause problems in the hierarchy? You clearly don't want recruiters to be asking themselves these sorts of questions, otherwise it's CV bin, basically. The usual rule with CV writing, of course, is if you've got it, flaunt it. However, in this situation, the secret is to downplay your qualifications. Make them less prominent. It's all a matter of getting the pitch right. You're pitching for a particular job, so make sure your CV reflects this and doesn't give the impression that you'd rather be doing a different job. If you fail to convince the reader that you really want this job, then you don't stand a chance. And next we have, and what if you're underqualified for the role for which you're applying? Well, that's a very different case actually, and there's really very little point applying for a job if you simply do not have the required qualifications and experience. It's a waste of your own time and the employer's time. You can be absolutely sure that there will be applicants out there who do fully meet the criteria, and you cannot compete with them. It's a very competitive job market out there. However, if you only just fall short of the criteria, but feel you have other qualities which more than make up for it and might give you an edge, then it may still be worth a shot. It's a matter of judgment, you know. Next, what if you've been dismissed from a previous position? An interesting one. What if you were sacked for gross misconduct from your previous position, or any position, in fact? Well, it's never advisable to include anything in your CV that doesn't add value or could appear in any way negative. And being sacked for gross misconduct, well, it meets that definition, doesn't it? Yeah. So, whilst you shouldn't make any mention of this on your CV, you may still find, of course, you might have to explain the situation at interview. It might well come up. And I think I've got two pieces of advice for you on how to handle this. One, you must be truthful. It's all too easy for a prospective employer to check this sort of detail. And two, convey the circumstances as calmly and dispassionately as possible. Acknowledge responsibility for the causes of your dismissal, and above all else, convince the interviewer that you learned a great deal from the experience and that this will never, ever happen again. Right, yeah, a very topical one is next. What if I've been made redundant? Well, I fully appreciate that redundancy is a difficult time and there's often very little justice in an employer's choice of who to make redundant. I empathise entirely. However, whilst it's unlikely you've been made redundant through any fault of your own, and at the moment it's most likely because of the general climate of the coronavirus crisis, the fact that you have been made redundant may still be perceived in a negative fashion by a prospective employer. The simplest solution to this is to not make any mention of the fact on your CV. I've already explained that including your reasons for leaving a job is unnecessary. Redundancy is definitely no exception. The subject may of course come up in an interview, however, conceal, and yeah, my top advice, conceal bitterness and resentment. That's something I see so often. Conceal any bitterness and resentment you may feel. Convey to the interviewer such is life, these things happen mindset about it. It wasn't your fault. Remember, it is the position that is redundant, not the individual person. Okay? Under no circumstances should you criticise the employer that laid you off. Rather than dwell on any negative aspects, aim to emphasise any positive outcomes. For example, maybe it gave you the opportunity to undertake some valuable training or voluntary work at the moment. And finally, it reminds me of Molly here with this one. What if you were worried that your age may count against you? Right, well, the best technique at your disposal is to place the focus very firmly on your recent history and to radically summarise earlier information. The advice I gave for Molly, basically. Split your career history into a recent career history section spanning the past decade or so, and then a previous employment section. You know, the former can go into appropriate detail, but the latter should only list job titles, employers' names, and locations. No dates or unnecessary details of duties, responsibilities, achievements. By making it hard to guess your age from your CV, you may arouse some curiosity, but it shouldn't reduce your chances of being called for an interview. On the contrary, it has actually been shown to increase your chances. Research has been done on this. As always, I'd really welcome in the comments section below any comments, thoughts, questions, ideas, feedback, criticism, preferably constructive, indeed suggestions for future topics I might cover in this show. And whoever writes my favourite comment of the week will become the proud owner of a limited edition collector's item, Jobs Guru Biro. Lovely jubbly. Actually, I'm thinking some USB flash drives would be good too. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, if you have any difficulties or problems with your CV and you're struggling to deal with them, then do let us help you. jamesinnis.group. Now, as well as heading up jamesinnis.group, I'm also the UK's best-selling careers author, and amongst my titles is the Interview Question and Answer book. It is, of course, available in all good bookshops, or if you'd like a signed copy from yours truly, then just visit jamesinnis.group/services/books. Anyway, in each episode of this YouTube show, I take questions from that book and I look at how to answer them. And this week, like last week, I'm taking those questions from the chapter entitled Weird and Wonderful Questions. So here's today's. What do you do when there is no answer? Similar questions include, what do you do when you don't know the answer? But back to the question in hand. What do you do when there is no answer? This is actually a Microsoft question. They devised it, invented it. And the answer to this actually forms the basis for many of the tough questions that you may be faced with, where either there is no answer or you just can't think of it on the spur of the moment. This question is easier as it allows you to explain clearly your own approach to problem solving. The interviewer will be interested in your approach, and they may well ask you to illustrate your answer with an example from your work experience. So, how to answer? Well, the interviewer is going to be wanting to discover your approach to simple problems that require an immediate response and to a problem that is not so urgent but harder to solve. You need to show that you can cope when instant answers are needed, but are not so impulsive when you have more time. If you can think of a situation in the workplace that demonstrates how you went about solving a problem that didn't initially have an answer, then this is the time to bring it up. Now, as usual, I plucked a little example from my book for you. I think there is always an answer, even if some are difficult to find or implement. I'd like to think I was good in a crisis and would try to find an answer, taking into account all the information that was available to me at the time. If I had more time, then I would consult others and do research to see if I could come up with some other options. For example, in my current role, we had a situation where nobody knew the answer, but by discussing with my colleagues and doing some online research, we came up with a viable and practical solution, and I can elaborate on that if you wish. Good answer. Okay, so I'm currently updating this book, working on a brand new edition, the third edition it is. So if you've got any interview questions you think I should be considering for possible inclusion, do please let me know in the comments section below. And if I use your question, then obviously there'll be a complimentary signed copy of that new edition for you. So now, we're not far from the end of today's show. I'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday. Remember, this show is Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday each, and almost every week. Just two more things. First, I must squeeze in some routine but important requests. Do please check me out on social media and connect, follow, sign up, or otherwise stalk me, but please don't troll me. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, about the show in general, or indeed about life, the universe, the best way to grow marrows, whatever, do please let me have them below. If you like this episode, then do please hit it with the YouTube thumbs up. If you have already given me a thumbs up, do think about subscribing to my channel so you don't miss out on the next episode. And if you've already subscribed, remember to ring that bell. Gosh, that's a bit close to my ear. So that you can receive notifications when I upload new episodes. And if you have already rung that bell, then love you, love you, love you. Finally, let me tell you what's happening in the next episode. In Wednesday's show, I'll be chatting about a variety of things, including the career changes being forced on some people as a result of certain industries being so badly hit by this whole coronavirus crisis, and also those deciding to change their line of work entirely of their own volition. And I'll be giving my top tips for changing career path accordingly. And next, in the interview question series, we'll be asking, how many dogs in the world have the exact same number of hairs? Blimey. I do hope you'll tune in. Thank you for watching today. Keep safe and be well, my friends. Goodbye.